What do you want? Advertising?
I don't know what you're doing with that. Okay.
Let's advertise.
Sure. Go for it.
This podcast is sponsored by Fight for Together. Just kidding. Welcome to Everyone Belongs episode 2.
Mm-hmm. Wait. No, we have 2 already on there. This is episode 3, but this is episode 2 of our stories.
No. This is our podcast, episode 2.
Oh,
the other one's not a podcast.
Oh, well, that's confusing. Okay. Well, that was a rough start, but thanks for joining us.
It's we're recording this downstairs in our basement, coming up on 9 p.m., drinking coffee to get motivated, and I got a little chocolate raspberry bar here for my birthday that I'm kind of excited about.
And your birthday was in July, and it's now almost November.
Yes, I was waiting for the perfect time.
It's probably... Chocolate does get old, you know. But I'll still eat some with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, little sneak peek for today. We need to get into this because we have a full episode.
Yeah.
For starters, I was very encouraged by the feedback from the last episode.
Me too.
It's such a weird thing when you record your story, and then of course to us our story is just our story. So I won't go so far. I don't want to do the fake modesty thing and say it's boring. But I also think, like, who could this really help? And evidently just telling the truth the best you can helps a lot of people, which makes sense to me because when I hear other people's story, I'm helped.
I think we're all more alike than we realize.
But a lot more people tuned into it than I thought, and then there was a lot of people said they were triggered by various things, which is always a good sign. Hey, better triggered.
We're keeping it real.
Better triggered than not triggered. That's what I say when it comes to some of that stuff. Because if you're not being triggered, that could mean you're setting yourself up for future triggerings.
Possibly.
Okay, today's episode, we got so much we're going to try and cover in this hour. But I decided I'm going to have a different attitude of trying to get through it all. We're going to get through what we can.
Yeah.
And then if we don't get through it,
that's
we'll
okay.
maybe stick it in the next episode.
We'll have a 10-part of our story.
Okay, so these are the things I wrote down. We haven't even talked about this, Cammie, so I don't know like what things are on your mind. I'm hoping you bring some stuff up, but
I'm sure I will.
The major themes I think we're going to cover today is starting off with why we don't hate Joshua Harris, the author of Ike is Stating Goodbye. We're going to talk about the honeymoon from hell. We're going to talk about Mars Hill and Mark Driscoll and the argument I got in with him. We're going to talk about a Presbyterian church, Cammie graduating nursing school with 2 kids, becoming a professional blackjack player, getting kicked out of a Presbyterian church, and the discipleship program that started us on the path to hell. That was super dramatic.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean,
Kidding,
sure.
but not kidding.
Like, we talked about hell in the discipleship program, if that's what you mean.
I'm just trying to, like, catch people like, at this point.
Yeah, good cliffhanger.
All that and more on today's episode. But first, we're going to have a little sponsorship thing for our podcast listeners. Those are important because last week I made $1.
You know, every cent counts.
We're whoring ourselves out for the man here. Okay, let's get into this. So last week, you guys listened. This is part 2 of our story and episode 2 of the podcast. And we talked about how we got married at the age of 20, being virgins. Technically.
Yeah.
And a few people have mentioned in the comments, I just want to touch on this because I might forget later. People are like, oh, Yeah, Ike is stating goodbye. Have you heard about Joshua Harris nowadays? And little like plot twist for the future was Joshua Harris and I have actually talked a couple times in the last year or 2 or 3. I'm not entirely sure, either on the phone or over messaging of some sort. And I wouldn't say we're friends because I don't want to like be like, oh yeah, we're buds, but we definitely know of each other and it's been friendly. And I say friendly, not... What's that noise?
I don't know. We're in our basement.
Not because it wouldn't be friendly, but there's a lot of response from people that were raised the way we were, of, I guess, people that were like really angry at him and said something along the lines of he like screwed over their life by giving them this false information and this false view of sex and this really rigid theology. And while I don't disagree with some of those statements, I don't experience him that way because the way I see it, it's a two-way street, and there was supply and demand. And he filled a gap that I was looking for in that time period, but I was filling with a lot of things. What had a huge impact on my sexual kind of morality and viewpoint was not just Joshua Harris and I Could Say Goodbye, but it probably started with James Dobson and Focus on the Family and the Breakaway magazine that I would get delivered to my house every month. And I would like, I mean, are you kidding me? Like a kid getting a magazine, I would read every single word in that magazine because I thought it was so cool that I got a magazine. Josh McDowell was really influential with his kind of True Love Waits campaign, also youth group and church, and et cetera, et cetera. Elizabeth Elliot and Passion and Purity. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there's any other like big ones, but you get the idea. So when Joshua Harris came along, he was kind of like just another voice that was a little bit more strict and a little bit more specific, but we were already heading that direction, and he just kind of like helped us along. So I can't blame him.
I'm like, he was what, 20, 21? And I just think of myself back then, and I'm like, he was really just a kid following in his parents' footsteps and doing what he was taught to do. And he took a more leadership role in that world at a young age. So I think maybe that's why people are putting a lot of it on him. But I'm just like, he was just a kid. Oh.
So I think, neglected to talk about our honeymoon last week because we just ended off with just getting married. And
we neglected.
It's worth mentioning. We're coming up on our 20th wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty safe to say that was in the top 10 worst weeks of my life. Mm-hmm. Possibly top 5. Possibly top 3.
Wow. Okay. Keep going. For me, it was definitely a negative experience, but I don't think it was the same type of negative experience it was for you. I don't know if I'm just like, I blocked it out or something, and that's why I don't feel it as intensely. But to me, like, it doesn't stand out like a ton with the background of our first 5 years of marriage. Like, our first 5 years of marriage were just tough. So to me, it just like, well, yeah, that was the start of it.
I think it was like massive disappointment because everything I heard was like, oh, honeymoons, you're just going to be like slamming and jamming and making love. Like, everything you've been waiting for is going to come to fruition on your honeymoon.
I will say, I think it took you more than a decade to get over it.
Yeah, which kind of shows how painful it was for me.
Yeah. And you didn't really, at that age, didn't really have the tools or the maturity to know how to move past that kind of thing in a quicker way.
Yeah. Yes, that's definitely true. But we'll just stick with a highlight. which was the last day of our honeymoon, in a conversation of whether or not we were going to have sex. I think for possibly the first or the second time that day. Could have been the first.
It was nighttime.
Yeah, on my birthday. Cammie saying she wished she wouldn't have got married. Yeah. Which I had never heard anything like that before. Mm-hmm. So I was devastated. But I guess I'm just like painting this picture of, we thought we did everything right by waiting for to have sex, technically, until we got married. And then it was kind of like a disaster. And we were just so confused because we never heard anyone at church talk about fights or sexual issues.
Yeah. And sex was very much closeted. So I felt like this was really the first time it was the first time I had to deal with real sex, whatever that means.
Like, and all the baggage that came from the trauma for you.
Yeah.
And I think there was probably trauma for both of us, but yours was a little bit more overt.
Yeah.
So we're like just sorting that shit out.
Or we're not really sorting at that point.
Surviving.
We're just surviving, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm dramatic in saying that it was the worst week, because it wasn't just an all-out, drag-out fight, but there was a lot of pain that is still imprinted in my memory. I don't feel it now, and I can laugh about it now. But like Cammie said, that's actually relatively new to the last decade. The first decade, I was like, oh, I felt robbed of this experience that I had built up in my head, and that the culture had... I don't know. Well, I don't want to blame the culture, but...
Well, I think it is partially to blame. I mean...
When you put off sex and you're basically told that it's this larger-than-life activity, yeah. I mean, so much so that it defines a person. Like, you're either a virgin or not a virgin based upon this one activity.
Right. And I think for you, if I can speak for you, not that sex isn't important for me, but I think that part is even more important to you as a person. And so it makes sense to me why you would have been wounded in that particular way. Because, you just you put all your eggs in that basket because it was really important to you, and it still is. So it makes sense to me.
So we got back from our honeymoon, and my parents went to a church. Cammie's parents were pastors. They went to a church, and both those churches seemed kind of boring to us. And we were like, this is so exciting. Like, we get to make decisions.
Oh, yeah.
For the first time in our life, we get to decide where we go to church.
Well, and I remember also us both feeling burned out, in a certain way, with just reading the Bible and praying and all that. I mean, I just remember feeling I don't really want to do that right now. I'm kind of burned out we just came out of Bible college, and I don't know. When I was in high school, I had this journal thing where I read the Bible. It was the year, you read the whole Bible in a year. And I was just I'm over it for now.
Maybe, but you're still doing quiet times.
Oh, I don't remember that. I was.
Well, I'll give you a little hint. You gave it up 5 years ago. So for 15 years.
No, I'm talking about the first year of our marriage. Oh. I feel like I didn't do anything. And I remember feeling guilty about that.
Okay.
Oh, I should be reading my Bible, but I really don't want to read my Bible.
Well, I think that's different than actually being over it.
There's different levels of over it, for sure.
Yeah, I could almost guarantee there was a lot of guilt.
Oh, yeah, I was, and we're still wanting and needing to go to church, and back then and all that.
So the church that was getting all the buzz at the moment was this cool thing by this hotshot pastor that I had heard speak in Southern California in the late 90s on The Matrix of all things, which The Matrix had just come out.
Wait, on the Matrix? Oh, he spoke on the Matrix.
Yeah, which
okay.
first of all was so cutting edge. And he didn't swear, but he talked about how he swore. And we were like, no way. That is so relevant. I don't even think we had that language back then. But
right.
But he had started this church called Mars Hill. And in one of their services, I believe it was Saturday night, which also felt cutting edge back then, was at a theater called...
Paradox?
Yes, the Paradox. And it was like all dark. And I remember that the band that played was... I don't know what they were called at the time. I think they were called like Team Strike Force eventually, but the singer or the bassist was Jeff Suffering, who was the lead singer from 90 Pound Wuss, which I didn't even mention this in last week's episode, but I had a Christian radio show in high school. This is how sold out I was on the Christian genre. So to find out there was a church with one of my favorite punk rock bands was actually like the worship dude. So we would go and hear these sermons.
I just remember it feeling cutting edge and super hip.
But that's about it. We weren't like, we never got like sold in. We went to a couple retreats, and that's where I got in an argument with Mark Driscoll. Like, it wasn't that exciting. I oversold it for the.
Yeah, it was about me working outside the home.
Yeah,
which is kind of ironic.
He was saying there was no point
our story
in you, I think, being in nursing school, or he was also saying that men should make a minimum of like 6 figures or be working towards that. And I didn't call him out, but I asked the question in front of everyone, like, why? Like, because I think we're just in the process of preparing to bike across the country, and we were living off $10 a day, and we were on welfare, which kind of fit our whole
missionary.
Yeah. So I think we shared last week that we didn't register for any gifts.
Right.
We didn't have a bed. We slept on a straw mat that was on the ground, and we were in married student housing.
Oh, we did a straw mat, and then we eventually did like actual a futon
to a used futon
mattress.
And also, like, in this 1-bedroom apartment, we had people living on our porch during the summer. Like the week after we gave birth, which was
a friend of ours,
before our 1-year anniversary, we had 2 or 3 people living in our apartment with us. It was a 1-bedroom with a child. So there was 5 of us. And we were just like, this is community gospel.
Yeah, and if any of you listening to this know who Keith Green is, I feel like that was our inspiration for that type of thing. With like community living, compound.
So no boundaries. But also there was a lot of cool moments about it too.
Yeah, a lot of it felt really like pure.
It was like non-consumeristic.
Yeah, just of our ideals coming out, and we lived it.
We had a ton of people at your birth. So this is getting a little into the weeds, I think. Now, the thing that stands out to me about Mars Hill was that in one sense it was really cutting edge. Like, there was a different use of language. Mm-hmm. I think he maybe would drop some F-bombs every now and again, which actually became kind of rare, I think. But just knowing that it could happen was interesting for church. And the worship was like unorthodox. Like, people were, like I said, were punk rockers and had, like, the guys wore eyeliner and the chicks were goth, and they wrote their own songs, so it wasn't traditional happy sing-song stuff. So it had a more authentic vibe, but in a lot of ways it was probably more conservative. And back then I would have said, which is what Mark Driscoll would have said, more biblical. Mm-hmm. But now I can see it was actually just more strict in other ways.
Yeah.
With traditional male-female roles. So one of the most dangerous things that I walked away with in that time, or that played in our dynamic, was Mark Driscoll had this kind of like emphasis with women pleasing men. And I might be taking it out of context, but I don't really give a fuck because, first of all, it's not out of context. We're just not giving you... I'm not saying that's the only thing Mars Hill believed or Mark Driscoll taught, but it was one of the things they were pretty heavy on, was women sexually satisfying their men so that the men would remain faithful and not lust and not be attracted to other women. And there was a pretty heavy burden placed on women, which at the time I was like, this is brilliant. Because I wanted sex. I didn't feel like I was getting much sex. And this guy who I trusted, like, it wasn't just that we went to them for this message. We actually, I don't know why I trusted him. I think we just trusted pastors in general. And he came across as being more authentic and more caring at the Bible than almost any other pastor we had heard. So we were like, this guy has some sort of secret sauce here.
Right.
And we want it in.
Right.
So, yeah.
And, I mean, now that kind of thing makes my skin crawl. But back then, I didn't think critically about those things. And I didn't even give myself permission to do that. So it was just kind of like, well, I guess this is what God must want. And I put a heavy emphasis on that.
Yeah. And I think I want to end the Mars Hill segment here, but Mars Hill went on for probably another decade after this. And it went from one campus to two campuses.
I just think it got crazier.
To 3 campuses to 15
because,
campuses.
Yeah, everything's built around this guy. And
we knew a lot of people that were on the inside that got really hurt and heard a lot of the intimate stories while we were in Seattle at the time. And how it's formed me to this day is, well, I think we were there while it was claiming to be the fastest growing church in America. And it was growing like crazy. And of course, all the reasons at the time were like, God is blessing this. Like, this is helping people. People need this. Like, we're giving them something they can't get anywhere else. It was all positive.
And if it's growing, we must be doing something right, too.
Yeah. And if you don't know the story, like, it's long and dramatic, but one day Mars Hill was there, and the next day it literally was not. Like, it didn't exist anymore. It vaporized so quickly because it was so fragile and so combustible, and there was so much dysfunction with hierarchies and power and leadership structures and legality and a million things.
Like, once Mark had to step away from it, it was all built around him. So anyways,
I'm very cautious of organizations that say we're in the top 7th largest, fastest growing fucking whatever in America right now, because it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't, I've seen it vaporize overnight, and we're actually involved around in Cincinnati. There's a local church that is talking that talk now that'll come up later in our story that is like the fastest growing whatever of whatever. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck because like we've seen it. They come and go.
Yeah.
So in this time period, we were, we had Dove, our 18-year-old now.
18 now.
But I guess we should mention we didn't use, this is an important week to talk about this.
Yeah.
No birth control.
Right from the get-go. We didn't use birth control when we got married.
Which, you know what? Fuck it. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't use it again then either.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I would do.
I've had this fascinating, I can tell you what you would do. You would follow me because that's what you did.
I'm just...
If you're your current self now?
Yeah. I'm saying if I had a lot of different things in my life that made me not feel like I needed to just blindly follow. Anyways, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's tough. But you didn't have, I'm not saying that disrespectfully, you didn't have many opinions on life at that time. And your personality was very deferring.
Absolutely. Which my personality is even just naturally that way, but it was even more embellished by
So
life
we didn't use birth control,
circumstances.
and it's kind of confusing, like that decade of birth control, because I'm kind of I'm not swayed by a lot of popular opinions. So what we heard is like, oh, you gotta, get an education first, and you gotta save up money. Those are the two big ones. And I guess the third one was you gotta build into your relationship. And all of that felt kind of like bullshit to me. So I didn't believe it. So then we didn't use birth control, and then we got pregnant right away, and we had kids. But later on, I started to develop more of a theology around why I thought birth control was kind of like bad or dangerous. And I think I retroactively applied that theology to my opinion, if that makes sense, even though it's kind of just going with my gut. And I've kind of seen this happen in a lot of ways, where a lot of spiritual people, and I'll just tell our story, you take what the Bible says and you use it to defend something you already believe, whether or not you're a person of faith or not. I've seen this happen so much in myself because, well, I don't know, it's just human psychology, where it's like the Bible, the book, it doesn't actually change the way you think for most people. I don't know if I've ever seen it change the way people think. It tells you kind of like what to believe and like how to defend an idea for most people, but you think the way that you think and you feel the way that you feel for a lot of reasons that a lot are genetic,
and then you just use the Bible to back up whatever
yes.
that is.
So that I didn't even know there was biblical beliefs that were against birth control at that time, as a blanket statement, because we didn't grow up Catholic. I did read some Randy Alcorn stuff where there's like certain types of birth control that were like deemed anti-pro-life. So we were aware of that, and we shied away from that stuff kind of consciously. But
what's funny is we weren't really one of those couples that was just super excited to have kids, wanted to have a huge family. Although we did both say 5 or more kids on our marriage survey.
That is really bizarre.
So maybe our subconscious knew something we didn't, but yeah. So we just made that decision together. Like, okay, we'll just not do birth control and see what happens.
And a lot of once again, this is just one of those things where a lot of the books I was reading were of these like faith heroes, like, what's that dude's name? The prayer guy?
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about, but...
It's not... I keep on wanting to say John Muir.
Not Hudson Taylor. No.
No, it's something with an M.
Oh, crap. Yeah.
Dang it.
He, like, had orphans, and he would feed orphans.
Yes.
I
Leave
know.
it in the comments.
I feel like
guys know it. It'll come to us.
Starts with a G, too. Anyways.
So close.
Maybe it'll come to us later.
Anyways, there's these dudes, like these missionary novels I would read, and these people of faith where they literally they'd spend every dollar, right, that they had, and then they would, like, the rent bill would come in, and then the day before the rent bill, they'd pray to God like crazy, and then the exact amount of money that they...
George Mason?
Mueller.
George Mueller.
I'm going to have to yell.
Okay, yeah. Okay, what are we talking about here? Yeah, so when we were 20, we got married when we were 20. So we decided to not use birth control, and we basically got pregnant basically on our honeymoon, but it could have been right after. And we were super excited. Had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. It's kind of crazy now to look at Dove as 18 and to think that I was only 2 years older than she is now and was having a kid. Yeah.
So what I was saying with George Mueller was, for me, our life adventure started very young. You know, we got married. I don't know if we had any money in savings. We got pregnant. We didn't have any money saved up. you were going to school. We were committed to having no debt. I didn't want to like work full time. Well, I didn't mind working full time, but I didn't want to like, something rubbed me the wrong way about prioritizing wealth accumulation over time with family. So we were like, all that to say, we were on welfare, which when I say welfare, I guess it has a negative connotation for some people. I don't have any problem with anyone on welfare. But it was like called WIC, where it was like we'd get like free cheese. It was only when we were like pregnant.
Cereal.
We got like
milk
and condoms, which we never used, but
obviously,
and peanut butter and stuff like that. So, but I think this is a way I would normally have chosen to live anyways. But once again, I was able to find biblical characters that defended my way of living, and I almost turned it into a spiritual thing after the fact. But it was just, to me, it was like just the ideal young married life. Like, you know, I don't know. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat too. So all this, the reason why we were living this way was because we wanted to get married. We didn't want to use birth control, so we had kids. And Cammie was going to nursing school because, one, your parents made some kind of, like, they strong-armed us into some sort of, like, agreement where I had to agree in order to marry you, I think I had to agree for you to go through school.
Yeah.
But we justified this because we were saying, well, this is something you can use in the mission field.
In the mission field, yeah.
So the idea at that time was for you to go to nursing school, and then I was going to be a doctor, and then we were going to go use this in the mission field. Right. And I don't think I said this last week, but like, or maybe I did, but around this time, I started to develop this idea for my dream life, which was to die as a missionary, flying over restricted airspace.
Yeah, you said this.
Track bombing the world. So
yeah,
when I got married and started having kids, that started to change a little bit, but still, my ideal life was kind of this like martyr's life.
Yeah. No
comfort. I mean, it was like to die in service of God. So we were dialed in to that. And Mars Hill kind of fizzled out for one reason or another.
For us.
Maybe we were like still going occasionally. But then, I mean, it was like huge, and it wasn't like, I mean, it was like a show where we couldn't really meet folks. And we weren't trying that hard. It was our first year of marriage. People were telling us to take the year off. And then we found this Presbyterian church on Capitol Hill in Seattle.
Yep.
And we went.
I think, did we go before we had Eden, or did we go right around that time?
You know, we went right around that time. You were pregnant.
Okay.
Because we got invited this summer that we got in the bike crash.
Oh, right.
And then we went right afterwards.
Oh, well, that's right. Okay. Yep.
And we went to this church. It was called Grace Seattle. I'm not trying to cover up any names or call anyone out. And it was really... Actually, you know what? We went before the bike trip. Sorry. No one cares out there. But
right. Well, so the pastor at the time, when we first started going there, we both, probably more you than me, but resonated with him. We'd never heard, I don't know, preaching like that, talking like that, where he really like was passionate about what he was talking about. And like, I remember him crying, like during sermons. He was talking about the gospel as we knew it back then. And I'd never really heard something like that before. Like, for me, religion wasn't really, other than like the Bible camp highs, like it wasn't really that like passionate. I never really saw people get super passionate about it, or unless we read these stories, right? But this guy, there was something different. We both felt attracted to this, and It was also just a different experience from our growing up years because it was more liturgical and the music was like an orchestra, like super talented people.
But not like boring classical.
No, like all strings.
It was like Seattle Orchestra. There was a didgeridoo up there.
Yeah, right. It was cutting edge at the time. And also the assistant pastor, actually more than anyone, we ended up befriending him more, I feel like. But
yeah, and the gospel that Cammie's talking about, I would say before this point, Christianity was very much about morality.
Yeah.
Like, you prayed a prayer to get out of hell, essentially, which I prayed when I was around 5.
Same.
And then the rest of it was about being a good person. Now, they would never say that, and that language was not used, but just by the emphasis of the things that were talked about,
yeah,
that's what it was about.
Yeah.
And this pastor approached things very differently. It was actually coming at a place of like talking about how wonderful God's actions were in sending Jesus to die for us when we totally didn't deserve it.
Did he get a lot of his inspiration from Tim Keller?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And how thankful we could be as a result of this type of love. So the actions were less about morality and more about gratefulness and how loved we were. Those were the messages we were consistently hearing for the first time. Mm-hmm. And it was very transformative to us.
Yeah, I feel like it helped us connect to a part of God that we were never really told about. Like God was kind of more stale growing up, and then and now God is being talked about as like how much God loves you, and this is what he did for you, and isn't this amazing? Yeah.
So then, though, well, I guess I'll say this. Once we found out, like, this is our place, we did what we did, which was we went balls to the walls.
We did what we do.
We did what we do. And we got involved in a community group. We started hosting a Christmas dinner for all the leadership.
We started hosting a community group.
We started hosting here. We started going on all the retreats.
We helped out in the nursery.
We put our kids in the Christmas play.
Yeah. You cooked for a retreat or two.
I led the cooking. We would make food for the, like, in between the services.
Yeah.
The cinnamon rolls, things like that. Like, anything that we could do, we did. I think we joined book groups and, like, you just name it. Mm-hmm. And this was, like, I think coming from two places. One was a yearning for community and connection to people that we thought believed the same thing we did. And the second was a desire to do the right thing and please God, because we were told that leadership or service, rather, was one of the ways to do that. Mm-hmm. And then this was our first experience where I think we came back from a trip and the news had gotten out that the pastor that had been so influential to us, his name was Tommy, had some sort of like emotional affair with the secretary or something. I mean, this is like textbook. And when we came back, the church was in shambles-ish. Yeah. I mean, it was like...
Which back then, that was such a big deal. You're like, oh man, why'd you do that? And now I'm just like, what? I mean, it makes sense. I understand why he had to leave and because of how morality works in a church, but it's just kind of crazy.
Well, I remember even that, yeah, it was a big deal, but there was a few thoughts that stood out to me that were controversial back then. One is like, why is this such a big deal? Because this guy's been talking about grace and forgiveness for this entire time.
But yet he can't have any of it.
Yeah,
from the
I'm like,
church.
so there hasn't really been false advertising, at least from my perspective. And the second thing is, like, what do you guys want? Like, a hero? Because I always just kind of, I don't want to say I expected that. I don't know why I wasn't surprised. I just felt like this guy that was like changing people's lives one week got totally discounted and turned into a villain the next week. I mean, this was my first experience with cancel culture, where it's like, I mean, it's hard to hard to describe how quick he got wiped off the radar. One week, the dude's like, he's not God, but he's saying things and people are crying. Men and women, grown men and women every week are consistently crying at the communion table over what this guy's saying and saying, you are connecting me to God. The next week, nothing changes except for one fact. People get information about who this guy really is. I mean, he'd been doing this for months. So, same guy. And now all of a sudden, people they're like, you are ineligible to talk to me. You're gone. I'm dead to you. You don't exist. And a lot of these things weren't said, but it was we watched how he was treated. And I was so fascinated. And I was like, oh.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, next week. Okay, so that happened, and that wasn't really earth-shattering to us, because I think maybe we hadn't been going to the church that long, and we ended up meeting up with the pastor and taking him a meal or two, or watching his kids, or doing some things. And man, I guess the next place I have to go, and I just do not want to do this, but I feel like I have to, is talk about Blackjack.
It was a big chunk of our life.
Yeah. So I was so excited about this job that I had, which was waiting tables at Red Robin, just because it was indoors and people didn't seem to hate me, which was very different from the construction job that I had for the year before.
Trash boy.
Yeah. And when we came back from this bike trip, I dedicated our last $800 to learning how to play the game of Blackjack, thinking it would just be a hobby that would occupy our summer. Long story short, through reading some mathematical books about how to beat the game of Blackjack, I started making money at this, which I guess this is probably worth talking about, and maybe this is what we'll have to end on, because this ended up being so transformative for me, because I mean, I want to just create the context here again. We are broke ass future missionaries with 1 to 2 kids going to a Christian nursing school. My own experience is Bible college, which I went to Bible college and partially because I rejected money and systems of making money or any career. And now I'm in a casino making, I just remember the first time I went, and or the first number of times, I remember realizing I can make $200 in like 10 minutes. And I was like, holy crap, what do you do with that? I mean, it's one thing. Yeah. Like, I hear Christians say, like, they hate money all the time. And I'm like, well, no, duh, you don't know how to make it. Like, it's easy for you to say because you're, like, you've been a fucking pastor your whole life and all you do is drink coffee and convince people with sermons. Like, you're a public speaker. So, like, of course you hate money. It's convenient and easy for you. It's a totally different matter for someone that knows how to make money and can make it and isn't. That level of person has a whole different line of respect.
That level of dedication.
Yeah. And that's when I saw the proof was in the pudding of what I really believed, because I didn't, I had never learned about money. My parents never talked to me about money. And like the church, ironically, I learned never talked about money. Mm-hmm. All it talked about was like, give us the 10% or 15. Mm-hmm. And like they're building campaigns and shit like that. So when I went to the casino, I was and this is important for people. It's important for me to tell this part of the story, that they understand like my personality and my persona. I wasn't like, fuck it, let's go have fun. Like, that is not me at all.
No, you were like sweating it out. That first night that you took $800, you came back, and because you lost.
I lost the first 800.
And you were just mortified, and you came back and didn't even want to tell me, but you ended up telling me. And
well, you guys remember I was the guy at Bible college literally 2.5 years before that turned myself in for watching 15 minutes of an R-rated movie, Schindler's List. So I was a rule follower, and I was a cheapskate. So, I remember doing my family shopping in high school by cutting coupons, because in Southern California you could get double coupons. So I went to Vons and got like a 2-liter Mountain Dew, like 2 sticks of deodorant, like 3 candy bars, and something else for 19 cents. That was like my biggest score.
So I've never actually asked you this. What caused you to go from that to, I know you read some books, but then what gave you, at least from your perspective, the audacity to take $800 and walk into a casino at that point?
Well, I have a propensity towards systems of thinking.
Yeah.
And the Christian system of morality made sense to me because it was what I was raised with.
Yeah.
And the traditional kind of like cheapskate efficiency system made sense to me, which was I went on these mission trips, and my basic mindset was spend as little as possible on yourself, which meant spending as much money as you can on other people. Now, there's other people in the U.S., but then the real money was to be made.
The real points with God was to be made.
Was to be made with the people outside of the country that didn't have rice and beans and Bibles.
Right.
So I was always doing this equation of how little can I spend on myself and how much can I spend, the less I spend on myself, the more I could give.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's all sorts of, that was the system I had.
Yeah.
And then I went to a casino and I watched thousands of dollars moving around. And I was like, it just totally blew my mind, because I didn't realize it before, but I was operating under a real like scarcity mindset. But you ask what gave me the courage. Well, what gave me the courage was I read about this mathematical system that was like guaranteed to win the game. So it wasn't gambling, in the truest sense. Like, if you define gambling, and this is like maybe TMI, but I've spent years and years of my life thinking about this, and it was so influential for me that I feel like I have to talk about it. If you define gambling as risk, then yes, it's risky, but everything is actually risky. That's why people have insurance. But if you define gambling as, putting your money in a place where you're mathematically expected to lose it, it wasn't gambling, because we had flipped. The way card counting works is it gives you the mathematical advantage against the house. So is the casino gambling? Like, no, the casino's not gambling.
Right.
So in that way, we actually became the casino. So when I thought about that, it all just made sense. It wasn't illegal. It was perfectly legal. It wasn't gambling in the truest sense. So, like, a few verses in the Bible that maybe I'd heard in passing, like, I was like, oh, well, this doesn't qualify for that. And from then on, it was just like, oh, or you want to do this challenge and, like, basically go up against the man in a contest and see if you can win, or are you just going to leave free money on the table? And I was like, I'm there.
I'm up for the challenge.
I couldn't turn it down.
Yeah.
So I start going to these casinos just to learn this game. And like I said, my mind was just blown. And like, I started being confronted with all these moral dilemmas. Because before, it was as simple as like, morality dictated like, okay, Christians should not go to strip clubs or casinos. But it was okay to go to malls, ski resorts, Christian bookstores, or a movie theater. Right. There was like good places and bad places.
Right.
So I'd see these people like lose like hundreds of dollars, and I was like dying 1,000 deaths, because like, oh, they're wasting this money. This money's going to the devil. This money is not going to Bibles. But then I had asked, like, if these people are wasting this money, what if they were wasting it at a mall? Would that be any different? Would that be better? And all the canned answers that I had before, like, everything just unraveled in a really good way, I think. And I could see that, like, what I was taught about money in the church or not taught about money was actually pretty shallow. So in a way, like, I left the church, which isn't entirely true, but I left the security of the Christian view of money to go dabble in blackjack, thinking I could always come back. But not very long into it, I turned around, I looked back, and I was like, I can't go back. Like, I had been fundamentally changed. Like, the information that I had been exposed to about how the world works and about how money works.
It wasn't so simplistic anymore.
The tools that I had been given or not given were not helpful for me anymore. I needed a deeper way to think about money. And I was doing all that through blackjack. So, you know, for those of you that are interested, I've been writing a book on this topic for about 5 years or more, and I've spoken at churches on this topic. And one of the last talks I did was, I think, titled "How Blackjack Saved My Soul," and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of not, because I feel like it saved me from these shallow viewpoints of money that I had before. And I don't know what else could have done that. So now I feel very free with money. To me, I see money as a number of things. It's a vote. It's a way of tabulating resources. It's a point counting system. But without realizing it, I think Christians actually gave money way more power than even a lot of non-Christians. They just gave it a different type of power.
Yeah.
You know, this is the final thing I'll say, because I want to move the heck on from this, is a lot of, you know, in Bible college and our young married life and high school, there was this contest around who could have the least amount of stuff. Like, the biblical thing was to not have designer jeans or designer purses or fancy cars or whatever.
Don't be materialistic.
Yeah, and to a point where people kind of bragged about it. You know, you'd have like someone say,
this is really ironic, right?
Yeah, well, you know, on the outside world, everyone is bragging about how fancy their shit was. Oh, I got this car. Oh, it's a Ferrari. Oh, I got these designer jeans. These were $100. Oh, these were $500. And on the flip side, the Christians were doing the exact opposite. They're saying, oh, I got these jeans for $20. And someone was like, well, I got these on sale for 10. And someone else was like, well, I got these at the thrift store for 5. And the missionaries would come in and be like, oh, I got these donated. And they totally looked like it. They're like, I got them for free. And you're like, oh, the missionary.
I don't even wear jeans. I wear skirts.
Yeah. Well, and I came to find out that both of those mindsets, you're both finding your identity in a quantity. It's just a different quantity.
Yeah.
But they're both as limiting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was like, blackjack was really one of those things that I think was one of the most courageous things we did. And to tie that into the church, it was so funny because
we were like loved and hated at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
At church.
People, it was just like the absolute worst in a way. Because like I remember the Mars Hill pastor, one of the main guys, he'd be like, oh, that's so cool. My dad plays craps. And I'd be like, your dad's an idiot. You know? But they were just like, oh, we're the same. And I'm like, no, we're not the same. I'm gambling with an advantage, and your dad's like just gambling. But people thought, like, people wanted me to be a hero, like in a way. And I remember taking the worship pastor and the head pastor. Because we get free food at all these casinos, and you know, pastors are fucking broke as a joke. So, but they all wanted free food, so they would all go with me, and like they loved the stories and. I met elders and pastors in Vegas and took them out to fancy places, and they all loved it. But I remember we were in like deacon training, which like a deacon is like a servant, I guess. I don't know if it was you and I or just me. I don't know if you're qualified because you have a vagina. Yeah.
A vulva.
Wow. Getting descriptive.
Actually, well, I'm just broadening my genitalia.
Okay. Wow, you really... I'm distracted now.
You You're probably not the only one.
You made me lust. What the heck was I saying? Gee whiz.
Okay, we were in deacon training,
Yes.
and then it was like,
Well, no, they.
right?
I think we were being considered for elders, or maybe it was
Not elders.
Oh, it was deacon. Yes,
Yeah.
it was only deacon. And then we had the meeting with the pastor, where the pastor said, "Hey, I like you. I like Blackjack. I like deacons, but you can't be both."
You gotta choose.
They didn't say it that explicitly.
It was kind of like, if you keep doing this blackjack thing, it just doesn't look very good
It's
to
distracting.
do that with and be a deacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was weird, because no one was saying it was bad, because they knew better than that, because there was no
Yeah.
I mean, I had, like, once again, to defend myself, and I'm not even doing it to defend myself, but I want you guys to understand the profile of the type of person and what our spirituality was like. I read every single book I could find, which there wasn't many. There was a book put out by Focus on the Family called House of Cards, which talked about the destructive nature of gambling. But the irony was, I read the entire book, and it never even defined what gambling was. It just kind of went with this assumption that almost anything that happens inside of a casino is gambling, which wasn't helpful for me. We had met with pastors and talked to people. I mean, I had racked my brain to, like, try and figure out if there was some way that this was wrong, and I couldn't come up with it. So I was ready. Like, if pastors wanted to talk, I was, like, ready to talk.
But it was a PR move, which churches do that. They're like, this
Yeah.
wouldn't look good, so yeah, no.
Which was really strange. I didn't have any hate. I wasn't upset, but I was like, oh, that's weird. You like me, and you like this. And the pastors were now coming to me for financial advice. We had given loans to my parents to pay off their credit cards because we were making so much money. We had bought property. Pastors were coming to us for advice on whether the church should buy property. We were, like, financially advising young people at church, because the church, the Blackjack had now become a Blackjack team, and was called the church team because it had so many people from our church who were playing on the actual team. And yet we were denied this leadership. Well, we weren't denied it. We were given the choice.
Yeah, we had to choose.
And that's when we made the choice.
Blackjack all the way, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we did.
Yeah, but it was
our bread and butter. I mean, it was like our livelihood.
Yeah.
So.
But it, looking back, I think this was a bigger decision than I give it credit for, because that was the death of that dream. That was our entire goal, was church leadership.
We were climbing that ladder.
But it didn't feel, I was like, and this has been my philosophy about college. I'm like, people say, well, you don't learn anything in college, but it helps to get a job. I'm like, if I have to have the type of job that some guy just needs a piece of paper to hire me for, that's not the type of job I want. I'm not being valued for who I am. I'm valued for a hoop that I've jumped through. And I felt that same way with that. Like, you like who I am, but if you can't take who I am, if I have to go down this route where I have to, like, put on this show to be helpful to you, it's not a route I want to go down. So we were still volunteering in the church like crazy.
Foreshadowing.
But we were not eligible for our dream anymore, which was church leadership. Yeah. But the question was, what about the mission field? Would it still happen? So next week, we have a little teaser. We will talk about getting kicked out of the Presbyterian Church. Dun, dun, dun.
No one's surprised, I don't think.
We will talk about going to Sexaholics Anonymous meetings. And we will talk about the discipleship program from hell.
From Kentucky.
From Kentucky. All right. That's it. So that's an hour. for today.
Oh, that felt like a slog.
It did. These are the things I'm the least excited to talk about, you guys. But I think
it's important. It just feels like a slog.
Yeah, and we're out of practice because a lot of these stories we haven't told in this way for a long time.
Yeah.
So, but for those of you that left YouTube comments, that was really fun to read through those and really helpful to know that you guys are following along. And I loved hearing what resonated and this, what triggered you. Like, please share it. There's a couple ways you can help. Big announcement: we are up on iTunes as of now. So you can find us. I think all the links are in the show notes, or you can just type in "Everyone Belongs" anywhere. Like, I think we're on Google and we're on Anchor and we're on. Just go to your thing and type it in and see if it's there. It's on more platforms than I know exist. And there's two ways you can help us now while there's energy for momentum of this thing starting. One is leave a YouTube comment, but actually more helpful, you can leave a review on iTunes. We do have 1 5-star review as of now.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
this podcast is 5 stars. Congratulations, Cammie. We made it.
Yeah. That person has no competition. That's great.
But besides that, we are happy to share our story. We'll be back next week with the rest.
More of our
part
story.
3.
Part 3.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time.